I am in Montreal. I'm Caroline Kotze, the president and founder of Women in Governance. Very proud to be with you here today. I've been involved with Women in Tech since the beginning with my friend Ayumi. And I was so proud to have actually moderated the panel of the winners of the Women in Tech contest, the global awards that were given in Paris last year. I was supposed to be in Paris this year again, I guess like all of our panelists, but COVID hit and we're all staying at home. In Montreal, it's 36 degrees Celsius outside, so extremely hot. 7 o'clock in the morning, and some of my panelists here are from all over the globe. My friend Tayo Roxon, who's in New York, is also on the same time zone as me, 7 a.m. We've got Dennis Just. What time is it, Dennis? Where are you?
It's 1 p.m. in Switzerland, all good, sunny weather and nice mountains.
Fantastic. Ben, where are you?
I'm in the UK, where it's the middle of the day, midday.
Midday. And is it raining?
It's beautiful weather. It's not quite 36 degrees, but not far off.
Okay, great. Antonio, Portuguese, see?
Yes, I'm in the same time zone than Ben. It's midday here, fantastic weather. It's really nice to meet you all today and to discuss this important topic.
Well, it's fantastic to have you. And I am delighted. I mean, I do a lot of work to prevent what we call manels, so all male panels. And I am so proud to actually moderate a manel today, a panel of actually male champions who support women, who actually understand the value of having more women in tech and want to do their share and want to inspire others to lead the way for women. I'm just going to, before I allow each panelist to sort of introduce themselves and tell you why they're doing what they're doing, I just want to sort of set the stage why I'm doing what I'm doing with women in general. Women in Tech is one of my topics, but our mission at Women in Governance is to have more women in decision-making bodies. So support women to get on board, support women to get in decision-making bodies of any organization, of any industry, including the male-dominated industries. But also we do a lot of work, not only to support the women in terms of their leadership development and gaining the assurance that they require to move their career forward, but also supporting organizations and closing the gender gap in the workplace. Because we can do all the work that we want around women and what they need to do to be ready. But if we don't have male champions such as you that understand the value of bringing in more women and organizations that focus on allowing women to progress because they understand that it's better for their innovation, it's better for their employee engagement, it's better for their branding, for their client attraction, for all stakeholders, and of course, financial performance and diversity of thought, then we're not going to get anywhere. So I'm particularly happy that we're talking about women in tech, and obviously this is the forum that we're going to have all day today. What struck me the most when I started working in that space of women in tech is the fact that actually in the 50s and 60s, women were dominating in that industry. We tend to forget that, and if you see there was that movie about how about NASA, I can't remember the name of it, where you saw that before the IBM computers, it was the women who were doing all the mathematics and all those calculations.
Hidden Figures?
Yes, Hidden Figures, exactly. Thank you, Tayo. And so when men went into that industry, this is when the women actually started leaving. And the rates of men coming in and women leaving was just astounding. And over the past 30 years, it's maybe a 3% progress that we've seen, despite the huge labor shortage. So it is obvious that we need to attract more women into these fields. We need to have more women graduates in these fields. We need to have more women coming into these organizations. And so I want to hear from all of you, gentlemen, what you think needs to be done, what you are currently doing. So we'll do sort of allow each one of you to take 3 or 4 minutes to introduce themselves a little bit more in detail and tell us how you view the situation and what your suggestions are to make it better for women in tech. So let's start with Dennis.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a brief intro to myself so that you know where the opinion basically comes from. So I'm in the entrepreneur and tech world for more than 10 years, founded several companies, and currently lead a small PDF as the CEO, who is one of the biggest websites in the world. We basically care about making the world paperless. So have a great and positive cause on what we're doing. And I mean, just looking at us as a company, and I think I agree to everything that you said, and you basically took all of my points that I have as well on the list already in advance, which is good. I think for us as a company, specifically, the diversity of thought or diversity of being a family and creating a culture is one of the initial and core topics that we try to achieve. Obviously, everything related to performance of the company, financial, business, delivery-wise, but we do see that this is very much necessary to become a better company in all aspects. And very honestly, I find it currently tough to navigate through that whole environment of not having enough talent on the women's side or on the diversity side to really attract for us as a company. And I think it's on all of us to at least try to make that change and, you know, demystify a bit that whole career versus family topic, become a better company in that sense of really balancing the man, the woman, and the diversity side of things. And that's the reason why and we as a company are more than happy to support the cause and contribute to women in tech.
Fantastic. Do you have any concrete tips on what you actually do to support the cause?
So there are some elements that we obviously try to. I mean, as a 50 people company, we will not influence the governments. But I think looking, for example, at the situation of COVID, what we initially tried to do is support specifically families and the women in our organization to just get ahead of their family time, because I mean, kids related to myself as well are currently staying at home. Kindergartens are not open, so we allow them to take the time that is just needed to care about their family as prior one, and the time that they have left. Obviously happy to take that as working time for the company, but the priorities are family first and work second in these times, which I think is one of the core things that as well need to happen on the educational side.
Yes, very important. And I think we're realizing more than ever, and probably husbands are realizing more than ever, all the pressure that women have, right? To doing their job. I mean, we're doing our jobs just the way that the men are, but on top of that, very often have, it is said to be about 2 hours extra per day taking care of the house and the children, so that, you know, these 2 hours that you could be maybe resting or refueling, or maybe splitting these 2 hours in two and saying an hour where Dennis is going to do the work and an hour where Madame is going to do her work. So it's it's that important. I think it's that important element that remains. And even when we look at the younger generation today, younger men are saying that they want to be involved with raising the children, and they are. And there was a Fortune article about that recently where they were saying, they are taking care of the kids, but they're still not doing the dishes. So at the end of the day, there's still disparities there as well. Tayo, would you like to jump in and introduce yourself?
Yes. I just remembered that I needed to do my dishes. So name is Tayo Roxon, and I run a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant firm. So my job is to go and work with companies ranging from, fast-growing startups to multinationals and help them institute safe spaces for people to be themselves. And I also work with, education institutions to try and get the curriculum and systems in place. And for me, this particular issue, I'm from Nigeria. I'm Nigerian, and I ended up growing up in, initially a military dictatorship before we transitioned to civilian rule. But then, as my dad was a diplomat, we traveled and moved around a lot. And the first instance that I saw of gender, bias was whenever my dad would get posted, my mom would have to quit her job or resign or go down lower. And I remember as a kid just wondering, how does that make any sense? But she would explain it to us as, this is just how it was. And so for me, looking back, that planted a seed because, much to Dennis's point about the institution of family and work, it's almost like people do this either or thing and they punish you for being a family person when that shouldn't, interfere with your work. And so I've tried my best to include myself in as many conversations, because a lot of the way men can include themselves, like I feel, is by listening. A lot of times when I find myself in conversations with companies, the biggest thing that I've noticed is that the awareness isn't even there. We would bring the issues, or maybe we'll be in rooms where women would bring up issues, and a lot of men would say, that to me, I thought that was normal, or this isn't there. And so I think the first thing is to raise awareness, and as any man in any room who sees something, it's very important to act and to call those things out, because those subtle things end up becoming culture. And when they become culture, you have situations where you are hiring and interviewing for people, and it's an all male panel. And I've seen this happen so many times where you call them manels. We have manels when we're trying to hire candidates. And what's going to happen is your bias is going to inherently show up there, and you're not going to be able to see things. And then in the questions that you ask, maybe someone says, I've heard of people asking about family again. Oh, so that means you're going to leave us, or that kind of thing. And so I think it's very important to think about that. And then the other thing that I recommend, especially on an institutional level, is, especially if we're trying to get more women in tech and improve the pipeline, it's very important to start young, because a lot of women and young girls are encouraged to go into other fields because they're, at a young age, oh, don't go into tech, don't go into science, don't study. That's a man's job. Get into this. You probably have a higher chance. And so for summer programs and for internship programs, I encourage companies, if they can, to start, creating all these programs at a young age. Hey, for summer, we're going to work with this high school in our area, and we want X amount, of women and women and girls and young girls and boys. When you start whetting their appetite that young, you have a pipeline that of people that already know and see themselves there. So those are some practical points, but I know Ben and Antonio have a lot of things, and we only have a few minutes, so I want to give them the time.
That's fantastic. So I love it. But yes, we'll let the other two panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll go back to some of the points that Dennis and you, Tayo, have shared around, the recruiting, around work-life balance, around education, because these points are key. And thank you for sharing your personal story, Tayo. We know each other very well because I prefaced Tayo's book, Making a Difference with Using Your Difference to Make a Difference. Yes. And he had me as a guest in his podcast, which was a lot of fun. I also come from a very multicultural background. I was born in Beirut, raised through the Lebanese Civil War, and a lot of my quest for justice and equality comes from these days. So personal stories often feed our passion and our fuel us for what we're trying to achieve. So Ben, we'd love to hear about who you are and what you're trying to achieve with Women in Tech.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to join you. I briefly, by way of background, I spent the last 4 years running a community of technology businesses called Level 39. And Level 39 is based right in the heart of Canary Wharf in London's financial district. So it's where 3 different industries come together: technology, financial services, and real estate. And all 3 of those industries are perhaps a little behind when it comes to diversity. So where all 3 meet, of course, it's a particularly important challenge. And we were host to around about 50 different nationalities, brilliant people from all around the world. But we clearly, when I arrived, had a diversity problem. And very quickly, I identified one of the things that sort of really seemed to exaggerate this effect was the dependence we had on pitch days. This idea that you measured the performance of an entrepreneur or a startup by inviting people to give a 5-minute demonstration. Now, of course, that's a great way of finding extroverts. It's not necessarily a great way of finding entrepreneurs. And as I dug deeper, particularly studying the research of Professor Laura Huang, who's now at Harvard Business School, but did a lot of work when she was at Wharton recently, she really makes clear that it'd be hard to come up with a more systematic accumulation of biases than you find in a typical pitching process. So the first point I took from this is that we must seek to make sure that we support entrepreneurs, we support people in technology in particular, in ways which don't require them to be first of all, extroverted, second of all, enthusiastic communicators in a certain sort of style. And indeed, of course, many people who are very brilliant in technology would not wish to stand in front of a huge crowd. And so we should create conditions in which we absolutely support their development without requiring them to do that. And so we ripped the podium out of level 39. We removed that single focus, the place to stand and hold forth. And I think we played a significant part in increasing diversity as a result. But I was also very much aware that simply requiring people all to come to a great cluster like Canary Wharf is itself something which brings bias. Working with organizations like Safe in the City, who notice things that someone like me just wouldn't. What are the safe and unsafe routes to and from work really bears on the choices people make about their career. So I found increasing, as I studied the performance of entrepreneurs and technologists who I met, that there were differences according to gender in the way in which people networked. And there's great work done by Ronald S. Burt on this, which demonstrates clearly that things like the gender pay gap are in part explained by the different functions people have within networks. Very often women play a much more closure function, whereas men more of a brokerage function. And that systematically disadvantages women in their careers. So I would invite people to consider the different networks and how they influence the relative chances of men and women technologists, and to try to create conditions where network access is the same for both. And I noticed that those who were most successful in breaking through these network constraints were very often those who developed their networks on the basis of shared values. And so for me, having left level 39 actually the week before the lockdown arrived in the United Kingdom, having ceased to be concentrating on bringing people together geographically, I've noticed that the most effective, and indeed I think most gender fair approach to network development is on the basis of values. And so that's what I do with a project I'm now involved with called Genie Shares, which invites entrepreneurs and technologists to connect not only with their fellow business people, but actually with members of the public, and now critically, key workers who in the UK and elsewhere all around the world are helping to make sure that the businesses that we technologists are building are protected through this crisis and beyond.
That's brilliant. I mean, that's another great way of saying that we don't only have to fix women, we need to fix the system. There are things that are full of unconscious bias around us, and it's easy. And the thing is with bias is that, well, first of all, it's not only men that are full of bias, women as well. We do see that, but it's, as you know, as its name says, unconscious bias. And once you start talking about it and realizing and making the changes, everything changes. So thank you for that, Ben. Antonio, we'd love to hear from you.
Well, my name is Antonio. I work for Atos. We do a lot of work on diversity and inclusion. We have run last week a 12 hours webinar on Global Accessibility Awareness Day, trying to create awareness about the importance of diversity in the space of people with disabilities within the workplace. But over the last decade, I've been collaborating with Megan Biro on talentculture.com, where we do weekly interviews with people working in human resources. And when you do this for this amount of time, you realize all the bias, all the constraints, all the problems that organizations have in terms of hiring in a diverse way. And one of the things that it's still very common today is somehow a disconnecting between HR and the business. No, HR is running in a way and business in a different way, and the fact that sometimes HR doesn't connect that much with that, it's one of the consequences is organizations is not as diverse or don't as they could. So if we want to improve the diversity of any organization, we need to close the gap between HR and business. And during this journey, I created an organization called AXS Chat that focused on diversity, gender, culture, but also in terms of disability, where we have weekly conversations on this topic. And we as a company in Atos, we signed with Valuable 500, is an organization created by Caroline Casey to create a kind of a Fortune 500 for companies who want to be inclusive also for people with disabilities. And is a kind of a pledge that the boards are able to bring this conversation at their level to make sure that they are inclusive at the core. On a regular basis, when I work with colleagues, with customers, and I was last year at the Web Summit, I was in Paris at your event, and sometimes I do a work with a customer, say, oh, Antonio, we'd like you to run a series of interviews. And they send me a list. And what I often need to do, can you please send me another one? Because I don't have any interest of interviewing 8 men and 2 women on the top of technology. So you as a communicator, you also have a responsibility to go back. No, that's not good enough. No, change that, And then you give an argument for people in marketing and PR to go back. Yes, this is not good enough. We need to provide Antonio with more options. And going to just touching on one of the Ben's point is when we hire today, and if I would like to go particularly to the top of cybersecurity that is often known as the male dominant area, it's important to highlight that some areas of technology, they don't really require developers. Not all jobs need to have someone with a technology background. So you need people with diverse skills, with diverse backgrounds within the space of cybersecurity. And if we make this message clear, you can open the door to cybersecurity for women just because you make it clear and removing that sometimes biased idea that you need to be a hacker or a cybersecurity expert or developer to be on that profession, something that is not true.
Well, that's particularly interesting to me as a mother, because I am the mother of a lawyer, a female lawyer, who is now back in school studying cybersecurity. So definitely resonates with me. And last year, I was chairing an event here in Montreal called Women in Cybersecurity. And I did a fireside chat with an amazing woman called Justine Bone. She used to be the Chief Information Security Officer of the Dow Jones and Bloomberg. So yes, we do have some amazing women who are in that space, but we need more. And so several of you have mentioned 2 things that I'd like to focus on. We don't have a ton of time, but I think 2 things that can really make a difference and have an impact, and these are education. So how do we actually get young girls to understand that, yes, they are wired to be in scientific fields, because too often this is the perception that they have at, from daycare, from 5-year-old, they're being told, oh, this is for the boys. So how do we change that at home, in schools, and etc.? And also the other topic I'd like to hear you on is on the recruiting piece, because obviously if you accept an all-male candidate list, and if you have an all-male recruiting panel, well, we're just going to replicate the same old. So who wants to jump in? Let's start with the education piece.
There's a saying in Nigeria that education starts at home and in the family. And so I think in the conversations we have on a daily basis, it's very important that we understand the power of what that means. Because when fathers or mothers are saying, hey, that's what girls do, that's what men do, don't do this, don't do that, it does stay here. And when you ask a lot of young children who they draw as leaders, a lot of times it's white males, right? So these type of conversations we have, it's very important that we make sure we're not gendering certain things with our implicit bias. And in terms of getting them into the pipeline, it's exposing our boys to the same thing we expose our girls to. That's the first step. Second step is when you're thinking about education on the structural level, we need to have female professors or female teachers as well in the field. A lot of times in I don't know the exact statistics, but when you have predominantly men teaching this, the bias will inevitably show up there. And so if you have an institution where there are predominantly male teachers, especially in tech, I will then encourage you to be intentional, because this is going to involve a lot of work, to find a lot of guest speakers who are female founders, to come talk to your your audience. And the reason why this is important is when people start to see themselves in the founders, they're like, they start to build that connection. And so I'm looking at the time. And so, yeah, it's very important. But maybe Dennis, you want to tackle recruiting?
Yeah,
This is we don't have time.
I think that's key.
I think I have one personal story which as well kind of attracted me to move into the space and the panel of where we are today, which is I think a bit sad, but covers both elements of the educational one and the recruiting one. And I worked for 2.5 years at one of the largest insurance carriers in Germany, and it had a female executive, and it was with this female executive at a university and held a presentation on us as a company. And then one female student asked her, actually, because she was, I think, 40 years old, if she has kids and if she's planning to have one. And that was a pretty tough question because in the structures of where we are today, for her to become an executive, she needed to make a decision against the family and for the career. And I think this is where, everything starts. It relates to Tayo's opinion and comment in terms of we need to promote equality and the same chances for everybody, but it relates as well to Ben and Antonio in looking more at the corporate level of the understanding and the connection between HR and business. On the startup level, I think we are the most flexible to make the first step into that direction, but it needs to hit the corporates because there are way more people in there that needs to change.
Exactly.
My colleague Denise Delamore, who runs part of our diversity programs, she set up an initiative to remove bias from all the texts that we have when we recruit, to make sure that there's not kind of an underlying language that would reinforce a group of people to apply for that. So we're trying to we're using a software in order to make sure that our language when we recruit doesn't create a problem and is inclusive as possible. And we keep a track of that to make sure that it's not something that you do we've done it and it's working. It's something that we follow up permanently to make sure that we don't follow up out of that track.
Yeah, and that's really important because a lot of organizations do put the right policies in place. And then when you look at if the culture is supportive of these policies, they'll say we encourage men to take father leave and we have a policy for that. Oh, fantastic. And so how many men have actually taken father leave?
Yeah.
Oh, well, no, they haven't. Well, then there is absolutely no point to just put that on a shelf, right? They're just, giving themselves good conscience. Ben, would you like to jump in?
Well, I'm finding myself enthusiastically agreeing with everything I've heard. You can't see what you can't be. And of course, the language that we use does influence, as Antonio pointed out. I'm going to offer something else as well, though, which is that very often we can get all of the processes right, as you pointed out, Caroline. But if we're not actually reaching the audience who we need to engage, well, it won't work. So I think you make the point that education is vital. But of course, so is reaching out to remote and isolated communities. And perhaps a particularly prominent one is women after bringing up children. There's a huge pool of talent globally who are relatively isolated in network terms. Now, that's not to say that they're not plugged into all sorts of other networks, but they typically become more remote from employer networks and technology-focused employer networks. So it isn't enough. It's necessary, but not enough to get precedents, to get visible examples, and to get the right language. But critically, I think we need to bridge into communities that simply have decided that they're not engaged. We need to go to places where people are who currently aren't engaged and meet them on their terms.
Fantastic. Well, I just got a notice that we actually have a bit more time than we thought. So this is great. I was about to cut you off, but we have more time, so we can go on. I know that a lot of you have just given some tips and tricks, but would like to dive in deeper into some of these comments. So who wants to? Tayo, you had so many different ideas. Do you have more concrete elements that you'd like to share?
Yes, yes, yes. Okay. So on the recruiting and the element, I love what Ben was saying. I think one thing that COVID has actually revealed to many people, many companies, is the idea that companies can adapt quicker than they think they can. And I've worked at companies, and I consult with companies, and they would say going virtual or being flexible is not something that I can do because it's just not part of the company culture. And so when you now understand that geography is not limiting you, and your physical place is not, is not a barrier, I think it's imperative for many leaders to be intentional on finding these networks, these type of networks in Antonio and Ben run, where you're actually running, incubators and people who are actually involved here, and then creating a pipeline in a virtual environment where you can do the job. And it's very, very, very key that type of culture is continuously inundated. We also need to have, as men, I think a lot of times we have this thing where we might notice something, but we might not think it's a big deal because, hey, it's not my business or any of that. But the problem with that is, much like with bias when it comes to race, is that could be the 25th time that's happened that day. And when that continues to happen, what that does is it creates and it causes other people to mimic that behavior and say, it's okay for me to interrupt. It's okay for me to make that joke. It's okay for me to bring maternity jokes in there and basically cut pay and do things like that. And that becomes, once again, a perpetuation of a system that, divides people. And then last thing I'll say, when it comes to gender gap, we need to be very transparent about the fees. There should be a bracket for everyone, and whoever is leading a team should be transparent and say, these are the brackets. If you're up for promotion, these are where we're going here, right? This is the bracket for this. Because I hear often people say men are better at negotiating their fees, and I'm like, nah, that's BS. If you're hiring and there's a bracket there, make it transparent. And if you know that equal pay and equal work is being there, you as the person hiring should be the person saying, hey, look, this is what is happening here. Let's make sure this all goes here. So that's what I have to say with structure.
When someone is hiring, they need to stop asking, and I don't know if it's like this in Europe, but certainly in Canada, when you're hiring, you tend to say, so how much money are you making now? And so if a woman is a victim of the gender pay gap where she's working now and she's underpaid by 18%, for instance, and you take that information and you use it to base her new pay in your own organization on that, then you're just replicating the gender wage gap. We're never gonna, so it needs to be very clear, as you said, Tayo, this is the bracket. This is what this job pays. And it doesn't matter if where you were before, you were underpaid, or you were, you hadn't negotiated your salary, or you come here and you don't know how to negotiate. It doesn't matter. What I'm interested in is your skill set, especially in tech. They're not necessarily the best negotiators. They're not, recruiting business developers. Which brings me to the money topic, which I think is key. We talked about female founders. They often have an issue attracting investments. What's your opinion on what can be done for to support women who are trying to raise capital?
It's a tough one. I've been in the venture game for a pretty long time on the founder side, and I honestly believe, at least looking at Switzerland and at the female founders that I know, that things get better. But it's essentially the same issue that we have on the talent side. So raising money for seasoned founders, it's kind of easy because in the end, the VC specifically in the early phase invest into teams and not into the idea. And you can make things up on the time, or dealing with the problem that you're trying to face. But you need to get female founders to the stage where they're seasoned, where then it's easier because of the network that you have and the experience to raise money. So I think it starts again at the educational side of incentivizing and educating young females to really go for it and try to, chase their vision or chase their dream and try to make it work, and not hiding in their kitchen or wherever, and basically not compare or equalize to what the men are able to do.
So talking about what the women should do to change that rationale, but what, is there anything that can be changed otherwise? Because there's a big disproportion between male and female funding, and it cannot only come from the fact that women are hiding.
I think there must be an intent from the organizations providing those funds. They need to be active, and they cannot be happy enough on having a pool of 50 or startups and 10% are women. They need to be actively going and pursuing that change. Without leadership, we cannot. It's not just about we are here and they need to apply. Is how you facilitate or how you sometimes change the culture of your VC organization to make sure that that culture of your VC organization is not really the problem or the barrier to make sure that makes that women not to apply for that fund, that sometimes they don't even know that you exist. It's also important that some of those VC organizations, they become diverse themselves. Some of the most well-known VC organizations, they are basically made by men from at the board level, and sometimes at the ones that vet the organization. So those organizations, they need to be more diverse themselves at the core.
Ben, would you like to jump in?
Sure. I think one of the things, a simple, if you like, a rule of thumb to use to improve the outrageous misallocation of capital right across the global innovation ecosystem, where 50% of the population typically receive maybe 1%, 2%, 3% of venture investment. This is a disgrace. It's hard to overstate how utterly out of kilter it is with the distribution of talent through the population. So here's one way, specifically an actionable course to take right away. Slow the process down. If you consider most of the stereotypical representations of the investor decision process are all about decision. They're all about this sort of act, almost of a sort of aggressive closure. It's right. Okay, I like the cut of your jib. I'm going to back you. It's based upon a kind of direct confrontation. Do you meet my standards? Yes or no? Binary outcome based upon this gladiatorial encounter. And Shark Tank and Dragon's Den and these sorts of manifestations reinforce that impression. Well, it's nonsense. As a mechanism for discovering quality and capability, it's appalling. It's just rubbish. Far better to slow the process down, to get multiple perspectives, not to rely on the judgment of one inevitably flawed individual who will, of course, manifest many biases. And this is not a criticism, it's just a description. Instead, filter your insights into a potential investee or investor through a network, through a referral community. This is why it's so important that you help people and yourself to achieve a balanced, healthy network. But this way, you make sure that while we'll never eliminate biases completely, we at least give time to allow reasoned response and analysis to mitigate their effects, and many different perspectives to do more of that as well.
I think one thing I would love to challenge and get your perspective on in that. So the way how VCs or the whole kind of financial industry works at the moment is I'm getting money from my LPs and I'm investing them into the best bet possible. And it's just solely about making more money, right? And that's the reason why the misallocation is there, because the more experienced founders are rather on the male side. And we had to get through that cycle somehow, and putting the purpose on the people that actually allocate the money as well towards the educational side. And this is where I'm a bit stuck in this whole discussion, because yes, I think what you're saying is totally the right one, but as long as we don't change the purpose of money allocation towards a greater cause, it's nonsense.
I think there's quite a bit of research suggesting that, in fact, it's not nonsense, that investors who put money into female-founded and led businesses enjoy better returns. And there are increasingly contrarian investors who say, well, hang on a second, half of the world's population is neglected. That means it's underpriced, so my returns will be higher. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, that requires closer analysis than just those simple suggestions. But unless it is truly the case that there is a perfect market and that investors really are spotting, as you say, the most money-making investors, entrepreneurs, and they just almost all happen to be men, then I think there's certainly room to move from 2 or 3% to, if not 50%, then, well, let's try for double figures at the very least.
Well, that's a very important point, Ben. The return on investment, and the New York Pension Fund actually a couple of years ago decided to stop investing in any organization that has an all-male board, because they said, we're not going to put our money in an organization that actually is not going to yield the same level of return as if they had more diversity. And a lot of institutional investors have now taken that approach here in Canada, the Canada Pension Plan, the Caisse de Dépôt, etc. And there's also an initiative by the G7 called the ILN, the Investment Leadership Network, that unites 14 different institutional investors in the G7 countries that are now demanding that anywhere where they put their money, these organizations demonstrate either that they have the women or that they have plans to bring their board closer to a gender balanced figure. And actually, I'm very proud to say that Women in Governance is in discussion with the ILN too. We have a parity certification where we measure what organizations do to close the gender gap in the workplace. We look at the number of women from entry level all the way to the executive committee and to the board. And we look at what is being done in terms of attraction, retention, compensation, fair compensation, obviously, promotion, mentoring, all the initiatives, all the policies and programs that are put in place to allow women to progress. So the ILN is saying, well, you know what, where we're going to put our money, they better be certified, because even if they don't have the right number of women today, if they are actually committing to putting in place certain, policies, certain initiatives to go towards that, then we're ready to put our money there. And this is the power of the purse, and it's working beautifully. Antonio, any other thoughts on that topic?
Well, we one of our organization's CTO, Sophie Prost, who leads our technology side of the organization, is always encouraging women to be visible within the organization across all continents that we are, because we need women to be more visible, not only inside but outside. And we have customers all around the world, and our customers, they serve their customers, and their customers are 50% men, 50% women. They are diverse, and they have consumer power. So when we are creating products, solutions, and supporting customers, that diversity needs to be at the core of the teams that develop financial services, technology services. If that is not there, we are not going to provide the best value for our customers. And going on that route, they are not going to be able to provide the best value for their consumers. So we believe that this is a channel that starts in one point and goes to the end of the consumer. And that basically needs to reflect the society that we live in. And we cannot continue to ignore this.
Yeah, that's a great point, Antonio, because, women are 85% of buying decision-making in everywhere. So it's important to recognize that.
Yeah.
I think Tayo wants to jump in. Can you hear me, Tayo? I am seeing that from the comments you're...
No.
You can hear me?
Yeah, I couldn't for a little bit, so I was trying to fix it. I can now. Thank goodness. But I've been hearing what everyone's been saying, and I think it really does come down to what Antonio just said. It is a lot of what happens in the workplace is unfortunately mirrors of what our society is. Whether it's COVID revealing how many people that we've taken for granted, or how often we haven't included benefits and pays. You're thinking about attracting women and people that identify as females. You have to create a safe and attractive offer for anyone. If you want to get something, there has to be something that entices them. And if there's a reputation in an industry that it's broy, What is the thing that anyone has done to structurally do that? Do you have attractive offers? Is there a good work-life balance? When we're talking about funding, and then I listened to Ben and Dennis, and it was very fascinating because I loved hearing the passion in Ben's voice saying it's just BS, it's ludicrous, and this it's just the disparity is there. But what tends to happen is we can see that, but not enough of people in the majority feel like it's something worth bringing up or anything. And I don't know if it's because of a crab in a barrel situation where if we give more women more money, we feel like we don't have an opportunity for funding. But it's this lack mentality that I feel like we need to first attack, because businesses are made up of people. Teams are made up of people. Companies comprise of people. And if the same people end up being co-founders in another company, it's going to go and follow them. And so we need to find a way to make people accountable. So that's what I think. And I'm sorry to get so passionate about this, but it's just something I see so often. Yeah.
Well, Kyle, you know what? It is all about people. At the end of the day, that's what we're talking about, right? And for the 10 minutes that are left, I think I'd like to leverage what you've been saying, Tayo, and better understand why, Tayo's saying, okay, how do we change things, and how do we, you guys are seeing things that not everybody is seeing, right? You're making comments, we should do this, we should do that, and you're outraged by certain things there's a status quo on certain things around how we can fund and recruit women. Now, I'd love to hear sort of briefly in the 10 minutes that we have left from each of you. Tayo already mentioned why he's been very vocal on that topic. I'd love to hear from everybody else. Why does it matter to Dennis, to Ben, to Antonio? Why are you male champions? How can you get more male champions to come in the same direction as you? Is there a personal story behind this that you'd like to share?
I at least shared some pieces of a personal story, but I might want to go back as well to at least my corporate time. And I think what Tayo says is super important. So people need to be aware of what diversity brings to their organizations. And in most of the cases, they are optimizing balance sheets and are not aware, and it's not only targeted to men or women. I mean, it's about the whole diversity and the culture that sits in an organization, how much value this can actually bring out of your organization if you care about that. And I think that's one of, or the core reason actually why, I really try to play a strong voice into that, because people focus more on what is written on the numbers on their balance sheets than in the people or in what is happening in the organizations. And if you can optimize 10% on the balance sheet for them, it's worth more than getting 20% more value by setting up the right culture. And this is just solely wrong.
Ben?
Thank you, Caroline. I guess so often we're invited to consider a choice between, on the one hand, for example, unqualified support for business, on the other hand, social responsibility. And what excites me about this is that this is a false choice. You can have both. And in fact, if you do both, each is better. In other words, business serves people. And when we forget that, we start to justify things purely in terms of this sort of adversarial, scrappiness of entrepreneurship. Business only is legitimate and only ultimately satisfies its customers, only satisfies the voters as well, if it's able to make a case, not just that it returns money to shareholders and satisfies employees and even pleases customers, but that it plays its part in communities as a whole. And right across the developed economies over the last generation, really, I think we've got less good at reminding ourselves of that. And technology has often been, and increasingly, cast as a villain. Technology can sometimes increase inequality, for example, and certainly it's got a bad charge sheet when it comes to manifesting bias. So if we want to continue to have social license to operate, we need to support leaders who really embody not only technical excellence, determination, drive, ambition, but also a sense of community engagement and support. Now, that's not a gender characteristic, but gender is certainly part of it. So I think that it's important to highlight those entrepreneurs, not that shout loudest, charge forward most aggressively and demonstrate those sort of rather stereotypically kind of macho characteristics, but those who bring capability to bear in a way which is truly for the public good.
And so, Ben, what got you thinking of all this personally as a white man?
Well, you're right. I'm a middle-class white male extrovert, and I'm quite tall too. So I've got a lot of things which just naturally seem to work for me. But I noticed that it isn't the people who necessarily have the catchiest turn of phrase or the most sort of soothing voice or whatever it might be who've necessarily got the best ideas. So I suppose I'm smart enough to know that I should spend more time listening than speaking. And in particular, over the last few years, I've noticed that brilliant people creating amazing businesses are losing popular and public and political support because they're not making the connection with the heart. And lecturing somebody on your brilliant technology won't win them over. If you explain why it is that they have some stake in the outcome you're achieving, well, that might. And that's something which I see the most successful leaders doing, regardless of gender. But it's, and critically, this is why this is relevant now, I think, it's something where there isn't an embedded male advantage. If you can express your values, your gender is certainly less of a determining factor.
Well, I have my screen here. Antonio, would you like to jump in?
Well, my mother was always a big supporter of my education, so that played a big role. She was always the one pushing me, and in the Portugal of the late 70s during the Carnation Revolution. So a lot of changes, a strong debate within society, because before 74, women were very strict to a specific role within society. That completely changed in 74. So where the roles and the jobs for women completely open up, and we have a very passionate discussion within the Portuguese society about the role of women. So my mother was caught on that as a woman on her 30s, on that, trying to decide what she was going to be, what role, what could she do now. And my mother was one of the first persons to have what we call a degree in social services. And she was always about educating others. So she played a very important role on myself. And sometimes she fought against my father about what I should be doing. And she always supported me on that. And then later, when I started dating my wife, she told me a story that when she was 18, she wanted to study code. She wanted to learn how to develop technology, create databases on those early days. And her father didn't allow her to go to those trainings because it was too late. She had to do that after school, and then she was only able to arrive at home around 9 p.m., and that was not acceptable. While her 16-year-old brother was able to go everywhere, even if he was, I could say today, the most irresponsible teenager in the family. So he could do all the mistakes. It didn't matter. She just wanted to go to study and return home, and she couldn't do it. And that, it's frightening when you see that can change a person's life. And for me, I don't want that to my daughter. I don't want that to my friends. So, and that's one of the things that motivates me. And today, I do a lot of online research in terms of communication, and I see that in the technology world is male dominated. If I go and I look to the main trends on technology, who are the most outspoken individuals, I see a list of 100 men, and and the number of women there is quite small. So what I do is I try my best to collaborate with my colleagues to see you can do this, to training, through skills, to encouragement, to see how we can break this voices in the social media channels. And this is the permanent work that motivates me.
Yeah, that's great, Antonio. I also very quickly want to mention that next week on Wednesday at 12 o'clock Montreal time, I'm doing a fireside chat with an amazing woman who's the CEO of Mila. Mila is the Quebec Artificial Intelligence Institute, which was founded by Yoshua Bengio. I don't know if you've heard of Yoshua Bengio. He's a global leader on artificial intelligence based here. We have a very big artificial intelligence hub here in Montreal, and it's a woman who's the CEO of that institute. So I hope you tune in. Anybody who's interested, on womeningovernance.org, you can register to our newsletter, and it's a free event. We're happy to have you. So we only have 4 minutes left. So can I give hello, Antonio's daughter? Love this new reality.
Future founder.
Oh, and our glasses match.
Ah.
Okay, guys, 60 seconds or less. Concluding remarks.
I guess I'll go. So concluding remarks, I think the summary of what I've gotten from everything here is there needs to be a high level of awareness, and maybe that's for us to pay more attention. And a lot of times, because we champion, to use the word for this panel, we champion masculine traits as leadership, and we popularize that as charismatic and connective tissue. What happens by byproduct or by default is that any other thing that doesn't match up to that is seen as less than. And so perhaps we need to condition ourselves to look deeper within what we feel is considered good and leader or best or better. And I think once we start to do that, the intentionality and our values will be more connected, because there are founders and there are women all around us. The world is comprised of essentially 50% women. There is no reason for any of the gaps to exist as they are. And if we pair that awareness with intentionality, I think we can get to where we need to get to.
We're actually 52%.
Oh, you see, look at me. Look at me.
My friend, brilliant with your remarks. Thank you so much, Dennis. Would you like to?
Yeah, happy to do so. So I really appreciated the conversation and discussion. And I think what everything boils down to me is that equality and how we can achieve that, and I mean diversity, however you want to frame it, is not rocket science. Yeah. So I think there are very practical approaches to that. And the least thing that we can do is start in our own environment and with the things that we can control. I mean, as our daughter that sits next to us, or in the company that we run, to make sure that we do the best to move everything into that direction. And I think, I mean, that's all that I took, and that's everything that I want to say.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Ben?
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be a part of this conversation, and I think it's a great thing that you're creating this conversation. So thank you, and please keep doing it. This is something which is important, but we're still at the pitifully early stages, really. We inherit a situation which is pretty broken, and it's a long, hard, and collective effort to solve it. So while it's a great pleasure to hear so many voices with which it's easy to agree, we are not anywhere near done yet. Let's keep it up.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ben. Antonio, the last word.
Well, I most of things have been already said, but my daughter was saying, I also want to talk. So what do you want to say, Isola?
Hello. My name is Beatriz.
So, and basically I'll close down here.
Well, thank you, everyone. That was wonderful. It was an honor for me to be moderating this panel with you. Please keep in touch, and more events to come with Women in Tech today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for having us. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.